Hi, I'm Hyla.
Hi, I'm Hindi. Welcome to your Relationshift. Join in our conversation where we explore.
The nuance and beauty of Tura's perspective on relationships.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Kyla and Hindi here, ready to introduce you to principle number one. So last week we spoke a lot about the principle of taking ownership, and we kind of just like naturally segued into that, right, Kyla? It was just, I don't know, it just flowed, or I directed it. But today we're going to be talking about principle number one, which is essential value. And I would love to, first of all, start off with talking about what is essential value, like what does that even mean? And also, what is the difference that Hasidus brings to the way we talk about it as opposed to the rest of the world?
It feels like a good place to go.
Yeah, so unlike pressing play, like Kyla, introduce us to essential value.
Essential value is the notion that value is inherent and it is therefore consistent and always present, and it doesn't change based on performance, talent, success, really any external factor. It's inherent with existing. And that is something that I think every person, most people have a very hard time wrapping their head around.
Yeah.
And before we launch into it, I think you should also give a definition.
Well, first of all, that was beautiful. Um, I think that is the kind of like the second step of like looking at what essential value is. I think there's first, like there's like emuna and bitachon, and emuna is believing that God is there and He exists and He's taking care of things, and bitachon is like leaning into it. It's like the fruits of emuna, acting upon it. So in ways, I think there's first that deep belief, understanding, acknowledgement of my neshama, my soul, that there is a soul, that God gives me a soul, a deep looking at that Hashem bestows each living being with a soul. Every creation has a part of God in it. That's something that God is breathing into them, keeping them alive. And that deep awareness, specifically about my neshama, my soul, my life source, is, I think, the first step is really deeply seeing essential value. If I believe that God is infinite and is everything, and I could also see that He gives that to me and really dwell on that idea, then from there can flow other things like essential value, like acting from a space of essential value. But the first has to be this deep understanding and acknowledgement that there's a God in the world and He gives me, His bria, His creation, a soul, and then something comes from that. And that, I think, is what the principle is, the something that comes from that deep knowledge.
It's not even a given that we're recognizing that and associating with it on a personal level, meaning it may be an idea that we've heard, but that is who I am.
Yeah. I mean, like, I know we say it every single day in Elokai Neshama and Brachas, the Neshama Shenasat to be that Hashem has given me. But it's also a bracha, it's a tefillah that we've been saying since we were, I don't know, 5, 6 years old. Um, and it takes a real maturity of understanding, like an intellectual maturity to really be misspaining and contemplate on that idea. And it could be something we have like in the back burner awareness of our mind, but if it's not like in the prefrontal cortex, deep understanding of our mind, then we're not able to act from that space. We're having an immature view of creator creation concept.
Yeah, I think it's probably, what do you think of if we first look at how we do function, um, typically? Like, what is the typical human default state in terms of I guess what you're saying is identity, like self-perception,
Mm.
and then the symptoms, or the what then flows out of that identity and self-perception. So you're saying the first step is I'm going to recognize that it starts with Hashem. Then I come into the picture, and how he positions me, and the fact that he created me, and in that process put a piece of himself into me, and then what that means for me, that I now have this piece of him in me. So, and that's the ideal, that I'm functioning in that in that framework. So if we kind of first go, when we're not in that framework, where would you say we typically are? Meaning, what would be the classic human experience when it came to self perception, and then the symptoms that flow out of it?
Yeah, the very good piece. So the way I look at it is, it's funny, this example is coming up to me. I used to be a preschool teacher, so I was observing a lot of kids. And one of my kids had weak core muscles. So how did I see that? Because when he would walk around, he would kind of like lean on things as he was walking by them. So be it a friend, a teacher, railing, he was always touching the thing that he was going by, because he literally didn't feel settled and grounded because of that lack of core muscles. So why am I bringing this example? I kind of feel like we, as very limited human beings, we kind of walk around like that, like leaning on, oh, I'm beautiful, or I used to get straight A's as a student, or I married this guy, so I have this. And we kind of just like have this very weak core if we're coming from a space of lack of value. And so we're just like leaning on certain things that make us feel powerful, or we're just drowning because we're constantly feeling less than whatever experience we're in. And that's functioning from a space of lack of value, right? So if I'm just attributing my value to, status, success, what I've done in my life, or the opposite, right? All the lack that I have in my life and what everybody else has besides for me, I'm coming to my life with a very limited mindset, a very a mindset very much based on what I do, what other people do. There's a lot of judgment there, a lot of fear there, a lot of limitation. Um, what else? There's a lot of ego, right? Tremendous amount of ego, which by definition means lack of God in your life. So I definitely know that before I learned principle number one, essential value, and really started thinking about it from a space that kind of directs or leads my day, leads my life, I was totally that child who was trying to walk but not feeling a sense of core, and just like leaning as I kind of drunkenly made my way through the yard,
It's such a good image.
right?
Yeah, because I'm like picturing that floppy kid that like can't hold themselves up.
Hmm.
Um, and even like if they're walking, not leaning on anything, like you're saying, there's kind of like a sway that's involved, because it's like, where am I going to find my next, you know, footing?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really great way of visualizing it. Um, it's and also what you said about um, pinning your value onto something, and then needing that confirmation. Um, so if it was like you said, if someone was a straight A student, so then academic achievement is it's part of how I earn my place in this world, and
Mm.
feel like I have what to bring to the table, and people can respect me because I achieved this. We function in a society that very much uh, like is works with this weakness.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
everything is about, you can sell me something, anything, because of this. I'm Everybody needs to feel like they have value. everybody feels like they don't. So now you have me vulnerable and ready. Is it going to be this outfit? Is it going to be this new product of makeup? Is it going to be this wig? Is it going to be this degree? Is it going to be this, getting to this amount of followers? It's pretty cutthroat. The competition is real. um, and that's where, yeah, that you were saying the fear and the judgment. So now everybody's in my way.
Yeah, and the affects of that are tremendous, right? So if I'm feeling like my worthiness is subtracted when I look at myself next to this other person, that doesn't breed connection. And human beings need connection, like our very human selves need to connect with other people. That's why Hashem created us. And this works entirely in the opposite way. So it makes you feel badly, it makes you feel disconnected with yourself, with the other. It's a very painful experience also. So it's just like this
Look,
downward
yeah,
plummet.
there's like a loneliness there because
Mm.
I can't, yeah, like you said, that it just takes away the opportunity for connection because I'm not connecting with, the enemy, the threat. And if we do, maybe if we're trying to connect, but we're still from that sense of fear and judgment, so then I'm still stuck on the competition piece.
So there's a lot of damage there. Let's look at the opposite, like what the ideal would look like, and then see if we could straddle the two and see what does it actually look like realistically, practically, to live from a space of essential value in your pragmatic everyday life.
Yeah, good idea. I'm thinking of like a segue, meaning a question that I've heard from people in connection to this, um, which is like, what do you mean? Of course, you have to earn your value. Like,
Mm,
it's not just a given, and there isn't a genuine competition, and that does bring out success and strength, and you do have to, like, fight your way to the top. And it's not like when you have that with kids and you're like, oh, your scribble is beautiful. No, it's not. Like, you're not getting anywhere with that scribble. No one's buying that. So either learn to paint or you're just going to be eaten alive.
mm,
um and that's the sense where it feels like, it sounds like, where people are like, it sounds so sweet, you know, like you're valuable no matter what. But like, let's be real. Like, How is that? How's that gonna, how's that gonna pay the bills, or how's that gonna get you a social circle, or how's that gonna work practically in a world that doesn't subscribe to, your little fairy tale about being unconditionally valuable and worthy.
it's true. It's true. It's a very good point because if you take that concept and you also apply it to, let's say, like parenting, where you were saying like that scribble is amazing, and you continue with that um, trajectory of letting your child know that whatever you do is good. So everybody gets trophies. Like that concept of everybody wins the trophy, and everybody is equal. And that's also not letting your child's deeply seeing their essential value. It's just teaching them that we want to protect you from hierarchy and the world, but it's not really presenting to them the reality, which is yes, you do make it in life if you work hard, and some people are more successful than others, but you're still not relaying to them that they are also essentially worthy. So, you know what I'm saying? Like both parents, let's say if we were to just juxtapose these two parents, the one parent who says everybody has to get a trophy, and the other parent who says your scribble is nothing and go work, and then maybe you'll become, a great artist. Both of those parents are not really giving to their child essential worthiness, essential value. So, what does it actually look like? I don't want to get into the parenting because that's a whole nother podcast, but how can we do that for ourselves? Like, what does it actually look like to look at myself and say, I have essential value and worth, and still function in this super competitive, success based world?
the word that's coming to me, and I think it's something that I've associated with this concept in general, is being whole.
Mm,
I'm coming into this whole, um, which is why I think the core, the kid with the strong core is such a good example, is that there is
mm.
a healthy whole, um, core to my being, um, and that's uh, that's a reason to enter the playing field, so to speak. Because I'm coming with something. I'm not coming here to see if I can find. Can somebody validate me? Can somebody give me something? Like, I'm kind of lost. Does someone have something for me? I'm 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 coming in with something as somebody, and then it's a matter of how do I want to express that. It's not a dependency on my surroundings. Um, like, if my base, and like you were saying before, my base is Hashem, and he created me and gave me a soul. So he set this up, and now I'm going with it. I don't, it gives a sense of direction and purpose, and yeah, it's like I'm standing on very stable ground.
So there's like this deep inherent understanding of I am worthy no matter what. And if I could, and I'm whole, that's what you were saying, like this wholeness. And if I could deeply lean into that wholeness, then it doesn't feel like anybody can add to me or subtract from me because I'm whole. So someone could say something nasty to me and it doesn't have to, throw me off, ruin my day or life. And someone could say something really nice to me, and yeah, it feels good, but it doesn't have to build me from within because I'm not broken. I am whole. So it's just a very grounding, settled space. And it's not a feeling, it's a belief and it's a truth. And what that truth is based on is literally God.
That was a really great way of putting it. It's so interesting because it comes up, I think, also in terms of, I don't know why, like, I'm thinking about this in terms of like perspective. I don't need to either convince people. Like,
Mm.
there's no thing, even with with like coming with a set of values that somebody else doesn't agree with. Let's say, as a Jew, coming with a Jew who's living a Jewish life and feeling like it's not well received, or someone does is not buying it, or seeing it as something that's good, or is disturbed by it.
Yeah, it's huge. It really is huge. Like if we take this and kind of bring it to the ego versus God conversation, right? So let's just give an example. And I don't know if we want to go with this, but let's just try. So let's talk about social media for a second. There's many different ways to approach social media. There would be probably the most unhealthy, where you're posting on social media because you feel broken, you feel less than, you feel like you need to justify your existence. And so you're sharing, or you're posting, or you're doing all these great things in order to get the likes and the thumbs up and that validation from everybody else. And um, it feels good momentarily, but there's still that loss afterwards where you just don't feel that essential value, because that's obviously not essential value. Then there's, let's say, a step up where you don't care anymore about the likes. You don't care about whether people like it or not. If they make comments, you don't read the comments. It's like, I don't care, whatever people say, say. Now, that might feel like you are standing in your worthiness a little bit more, but it's still not essential worthiness, because deep essential value, deep understanding of my neshama, my purpose, my inherent value comes from God, would be deeply recognizing other people's essential value and worthiness. And so if you're in a space of, I don't care what other people think, that's ego. That's not seeing my inherent value, my essential worth, and seeing other people's essential value and worth. If I could deeply stand in my essential value, I would be open, receptive, not like stiff, strong, shut people out. And I think maybe there's a third level, and I could probably be skipping steps or whatever it is, but let's say sharing on social media, what does that look like coming from a space of deep essential value? Would be to deeply recognize that I have a light within me to share to the world. I recognize that God sees me in a way that I probably don't see myself, but I want to grow into seeing and get more attuned to. And the more that I could push like all the voices aside and the ego aside and the walls aside, then maybe I could let that light shine forth. And if there are like these peekaboo moments of me being able to see that light and shine that light, then maybe from there I could share it on social media, but not because it adds to my essential value or because I don't care about what people think. It's because I'm attuned and I'm aligned to God is giving me a purpose here. And if I could get attuned to it, and maybe I had a moment of that and I want to share that with the world because it's a godly purpose, then that's why I'm sharing on social media. So it's a high level, right? That's like really very intentional. But I think it's attainable.
Yeah, I think a key piece of what you mentioned is a way to kind of know if you're going in the right direction is how you're perceiving other people, because we mentioned not being threatened, but the flip side of that is not disengaging, like you said, being like, I don't care, I'm rising above. It's if I have value, then so do they, and if the value is coming from God, then there's enough space for everybody. My light won't shine less or more because of you. No, I'm saying more. Yes, it won't shine less because of you, or we have to take turns. But in God's world, we can shine together, and it can just grow because of the collaboration, and not in a way
Mm,
that anybody loses.
beautiful.
Let's say even with ownership, what would you how would it feed into taking ownership of myself? How would it feed into my relationship with my husband?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'd love to, let's say, give an example. Um, what or a series of examples. So something that came up for me a lot before I was able to tap into a little bit of essential value was the feeling of defensiveness that would come up a lot for me. So let's say, my husband would make a comment about dinner, like either good or bad. I don't know what, but I would always feel defensive. If he made a comment about like what the kids were wearing on Shabbos, if maybe this just happened, my son's shirt looked a little big, and my husband said something like, you know, what do you think we could buy a shirt that's like more his size? And I felt inside so defensive, which to me is just an indicator of I'm not standing in my essential value because he obviously said something that triggered me tremendously. So there must be some sort of self-judgment there around shopping for my kids or how well they're dressed on Shabbos, right? So there's something there. If I really was able to stand in my own essential value, a person can make a comments like that and I could be open and receptive towards it. I wouldn't feel defensive. I wouldn't feel like this is, a spear to my heart. It could just be, oh, he's right. The shirt is a little bit big. And it doesn't have to even mean that he was right. He's not always right. But the idea is, it's like, I could hear that someone else is saying something. Maybe there's a grain of truth to it, maybe not, but I could be just like an objective, easy, open voice to hear what's happening and then respond, right? So like that famous example of someone saying, your shelf is dusty, or your house is a little bit not clean. So for someone who attaches their value to the state of cleanliness at their house, then they're thrown, right? They don't feel worthy any longer, as opposed to someone who stands in their own essential value. If someone makes a comment about the cleanliness of their house, they could like laugh it off, like not laugh it off, but like just laugh, like you're right. Such a mess today. And it doesn't have to be their identity. It doesn't have to attack them at their core. So that's one way, just like practically, that I felt essential value contribute to my life. When I saw myself feeling defensive, it was a signal to me that A, I have some sort of self judgment there or belief about myself. So it would be B, and then C would be I'm in a space of ego right now. I'm not in a space of essential value. I'm not looking at my world from a godly perspective. Instead, I'm like in my broken Hindi's a limited person perspective.
You're saying it, and it like sounds in a way simple, and I think it's huge in terms of, let's say, just that impact alone in how I receive feedback. um I mean, it's a huge game changer if you're talking about in a marriage, where there's a constant flow of conversation. Somebody not in their essential value can pretty much take anything. um a lot of things can feel hurtful. If I'm able to just see a comment as a comment and not a reflection of my worth, yeah, I think it's a big one.
It's
And
huge.
the truth is, even if I even the awareness that I got triggered because I attached my value to this, and then it becomes something that I can work through, as opposed to, why is the other person saying that? What's wrong with them? Who says that? What, you know, where's their gratitude? Where's their respect? Don't they know, XYZ? Um,
Mm,
so it's just at least a direction that I can go with that feeling. And it doesn't have to become a relationship issue. And then a
it's-
comment doesn't have to turn into a 3-day fight.
I love that you're saying that. So it's like let's say just talking about defensiveness, right? So that's like an indicator light that something's going on inside you. And what I'm hearing you say is how tremendously powerful it is to be able to look inward and say, this is something for me to explore. Like there's an awareness here that's coming up for me, which is so powerful to just know what's happening inside of you. And what often happens is that instead we kind of turn it on the other person and say, this is a your issue kind of thing, as opposed to it's not my issue, but it is something that I should be exploring. Why am I so defensive right now? Why do I feel like I'm being attacked when my husband made a comment about my son's shirt? Why is my world crumbling with the comments like that? Like there's something there to take ownership over. And that awareness is huge. Yes. Something that I want to talk about though for a second is confidence. Because people sometimes um, will equate essential value and confidence, and they're not the same. So, again, kind of going back to that other example with sharing on social media, someone who has a lot of confidence, let's say in this situation with, let's say, my husband commenting about the my child's shirt, someone who has a lot of confidence will just be like, I don't care that he said that, whatever. I know that I dress the kids well, right? So that kind of expression or attitude seems like she's standing in her own essential value, but again, there's a lack of humility there and openness and um, kind of like this just a flowing energy that to me sounds more like ego and less like space for the other, space for myself, space for God, in this conversation.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're saying, like, you could have a thicker skin. Like, that's
Right.
a possibility. Um, so then maybe you're not relating, because we're talking about people who get defensive and stressed and panicked, and maybe you're like, I'm fine. I'm rolling. We're good. Um, and what is that? Um, and is it? I think that person in a moment of truth would also be able to tell you that they know something's missing,
Mm,
and they do get hurt, and they're just afraid of going there, or like of what that means about them. There's
Mm.
a vulnerability there that's uncomfortable. Is it God based or not? That's really what you're saying, and that's what you want to be asking yourself: is my value driven by God or something else? That's not what we're trying to. That's not what we're trying to address.
Something else that I've heard other people talk about is, so, and this sounds funny because it almost feels like we're talking in circles then, but I've heard this question where if you're saying that my soul, my neshama that Hashem gave to me, which is imbued with the purpose in this world, is the only reason why I'm feeling essential value, then you're still saying that my value is based on my purpose here in this world. And that's kind of like this loop of we're still in that space of my
Like, so
success.
then I have to achieve my purpose to be valuable.
Exactly. Exactly. Have you ever gotten that
Yeah,
question?
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't need to get the question. I can relate to it from a personal level.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
but exactly.
um, like I I very much feel like for God to find me worthy, meaning yes, okay, let's make this about God, sure, but God gave me something to do, um, and He has an expectation of me, and I can't show up empty-handed. I can't
Right.
show up being like, sorry, just didn't get around to it. Um, but that's a big one for me. So just and then it gets, for me, it goes to like, can I, you know, can I really believe that God just values me for me?
Mm. Mhm.
Uh, that becomes a big deal to wrap, to get around. Um, like, yeah, put other people aside. Let's just make this about me and God. And we do have, I have all this evidence, that God wants very specific things from me, and He says things. The tradition seems to imply that you are, the more mitzvahs you're doing, and the more committed you are to the cause, the better you are. Um, and here's the thing that here's the resolution, and I think there is a controversial side to it, but I think it does make people uncomfortable, um, because it's like, we're not saying stop doing mitzvahs and stop learning Torah, but I said this to somebody recently, and they're like, yeah, but people don't want to say that because then they're scared that the religion's going to fall apart.
Right.
And that's, yeah, that's very sad
Yeah.
that we can only picture, we can only visualize being motivated by fear.
Hmm.
We can't picture another compelling motivation, or more so than motivation, like what it feels like to be in a really healthy relationship, and what that would look like in practice.
It's basically the word unconditional. Like we're tapping into a part of God that is unconditional, right? So in ways, yes, he is Hashem of Din, and at the same time, he's also Hashem of Rachamim. And it's hard for us to swallow that God has two directly opposed parts of him, and he could harbor two feelings at the same time and be experiencing two levels of relationship with us at the same time. He wants us to fulfill our purpose. He wants to do Torah and mitzvahs, and at the same time, no matter what we do, there's still this unconditional love. It's hard for us to wrap our minds around that because we don't usually look at relationships like that. We don't look at ourselves like that. We are very much in that space of judgment. So we can relate to the God of Din, the God of judgment, the God of Schar, who rewards us for doing good things and punishes us for doing bad things. That is very relatable, right? That's what a lot of our relationships are like. And then there's also the possibility of so much more, which is an unconditional love and respect relationship that God has for us, and He chose us, and He loves us no matter what we do, how we perform. And it's hard for us to deeply receive that. It just feels so overwhelming to think that no matter what, me, this lowly earthly being, is beloved by God. It's it takes a tremendous amount of just what? Like receiving that unbelievable concept. And just to take that, I mean, that's a beautiful concept in and of itself, but then to like bring that to a relationship, let's say between a husband and wife, that's supposed to be there too, right? There's supposed to be this unconditional love and respect in in the relationship. Obviously, you know, a wife wants her husband to take care of her in whatever way that translates, whatever that means for her. It could be emotional connection, it could be financially supporting her, it could be spending enough time with her, whatever it is. She wants to feel that from him. Um, and he also wants to feel the same from his wife, right? We come in kind of with expectations, and at the same time, we also come in, and maybe not everybody knows this, but when you sign up to get married, you're also signing up to an unconditional love and respect relationship. Um, and I think that's important to address here, to look at here.
What I've noticed is when this comes up, there's let's say when you talk about it in a relationship, like where I would be unconditionally loving and respecting my spouse, the response would be, but what about all the like, but what about what we need, or what about the ksuba?
Right. Hello.
You just go around loving people unconditionally. That sounds chaotic. Again, from that like fear control model, that we have to establish some sort of structure here to keep people in line. Because if we tell them that they're just worthy whether or not they do the mitzvahs, well then who knows what they're going to do. And if you give your husband the feeling that he's unconditionally loved and respected, you know maybe he'll just sit on the couch and stare at the wall from the morning till the night, just relishing in that unconditional love and respect. And it's a fear to look at, and also like really just question, like, do you really think that if you leaned fully into the fact that God finds you deeply worthy, essentially worthy, that would result in you being like, okay, I am now, I don't have to do a mitzvah ever again?
Because that's not what a relationship is.
Yeah, it's not it says it's not a transaction.
Right.
Eh, like people say, like someone asked me a question recently, like, well, if we're doing all of this for God, then what's He doing for us?
Right.
And I'm like,
Yeah, what is he doing for you? I want to hear all about that. Let's talk about that.
no, I don't
Can
want.
you list 1 million things that God is doing for you every
I
single
don't.
day?
No, I don't want to talk about that, because why are you there?
I get that.
No, I hear you also. Meaning that's my initial response. But what do you mean? What is He doing for you? What is He not doing for you? But
Right.
but why is it a? It's it's a very primitive relationship
Mm,
where there's an exchange of um I do this for you, you do this for me. We go back and forth. And I don't think maybe some people would be offended by me calling it primitive, because I think a lot of people have made a sort of package that in a very sophisticated way, where there's this beautiful give and take. Um, I don't know.
it's
It
like
doesn't.
it's like the olden days, like the bartering system, like I trade you, you trade me, like I feel like thinking about like real old
Right, right.
natives.
That's real trade. Something about it feels to me like we're undermining ourselves. We're selling ourselves short. We're diminishing ourselves to people um that only value things based on what we were going back to before, but only value things based on like measurable results, and like, if I got what I wanted to get when I wanted to get it, and it worked out the way I thought it should work out, or better. Like, I have this box, and if it's fitting in, so then it's working. And like, moving into a space of what does it mean to connect with other?
Mm,
What does it mean to experience something outside of yourself?
mm,
Without thinking about what's going to come as a result, just that is as an end goal in itself. Relationship, experience another as they are. It's a huge, I mean, that's a tremendous, tremendous gift if you're talking about how deeply we want connection. And as soon as I make it about a criteria, I lose that.
right. Because you become needy and demanding and expectation. The example that comes up for me is actually I think the example, and you would know this better, that the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya, where he talks about, the king who, not even like a father son king prince relationship, but like a king who loves one of his I don't want to say parishioners, like citizens, and exalts him, right? So goes all the way out to the poorest part of town and brings him up to his palace and gives him robes and just like really welcomes him into his space. And there's just like this incredible experience of the king sees me, wants me, loves me, is showering me with hugs and kisses, like deeply just wants to hold me. And this this inability to like see that for what it is, that there's a relationship of deep, essential, unconditional love. And if I can't see that, then exactly like what you're saying, I can never get out of myself to see the other in the relationship. I'm always going to be approaching my relationship, let's say between a husband and wife, always approaching it from a space of what are my needs, what are my wants, what do I get out of it, as opposed to if I could really relax into the greatness of what's happening here, that unconditional aspect, then I could see the other. But otherwise, I'm always trying to protect myself and make sure that my needs are taken care of.
It's funny because I'm thinking of it's like in the example, like the king takes him in, and he's giving him, let's say you said like robes or whatever, wants to dress him in royal clothing, and peasant goes, I'm so touched, but this is not my size.
Right.
Like you got the wrong size. Like you could have thought this through a little better, like if you were really coming to, I feel like we do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, that was like so, like so thoughtful of you to take me out on a date, but like, did you really think I would like this place? Like, you could have asked me, and the missed opportunity there is the connection.
Mm. Wait, so I want to bring out the brilliance of what you're saying. So what we're not saying is just be grateful. Like just be grateful that this is what he's doing for you and
Yeah,
shut down
he bought
that
you
part
the
of yourself.
clothes. Yeah,
Yeah, like how could you just be so not seeing what he's bringing to you here? And we're like backpedaling and saying it's not about being grateful or not being grateful. It's about actually standing in your essential worth, that wholeness. I loved that you brought that out, like that wholeness. And if I could stand in my wholeness, then I could see the other, then I could be open to the other. But if I'm not feeling whole, then I'm constantly in that space of, is this date really catered to me or is he thinking about himself? Right? Did he take me to this restaurant because he likes the wine they have here? Or is it because he knows that I love milchiks? Like 100%, you're always in that space of assessing, does he love me? Does he not? Right? That judgment constantly, as opposed to if I see myself as whole, I could just deeply see him and what he's bringing to me. And it doesn't have to do with just be grateful. That's not what we're saying here.
yeah. It's a very when you said before, it brings you to a place where you actually need to receive from the other person that this person is doing something for me, and that's uncomfortable. It feels, yeah, it kind of feels overwhelming. Like you're doing this for me. Like that's all this is. That you're just there has to be something more. You have to have another reason. There's someone like, and I think that's also why you were saying like it's also not confidence, meaning it's not like not thinking of yourself more, thinking of yourself less. It's like if you're thinking of it's not good enough for me or it's too much for me, either way, it's like it's not about it's not a measurement thing. It's just, yeah, it might be too much, or it's but here I am giving this to you,
Mm.
because I want you.
It's a real shift. It's a totally different perspective. It really shifts your entire dynamic, the way you're approaching your relationship, the way you approach your world, right? Deeply understanding and settling into that essential value. And I think it's important to say that it's not something that happens, you know, it's just a switch, turn on, turn off. I think it's a lifelong pursuit of welcoming more and more of that unconditional love, that essential wholeness, into your reality, because we do live on a shama inside of a guf, and our very real experience is not what we're talking about here. So it's something that I think is a lifelong pursuit of kind of bringing that understanding into our reality.
There's stages of awareness, like just to, let's say, what can we give to our listeners to look at yourself and say, you know how foreign does this sound to me? um how much of how I perceive my worth and the worth of others is conditional?
Mm.
um how transactional do my relationships feel?
Yeah, those are great questions. Also, like, is there a way that I could translate this into maybe a reminder for myself, right? So, as much as I'm saying that you can't turn it on and off, you could also just remind yourself throughout the day. I know for myself, if I'm walking into a situation that to me feels overwhelming, scary, makes me feel less than, I'm not saying that I perfectly embrace this, but if I'm able to just remind myself that I am essentially worthy and whole, it does shift my perspective, my ability to just relax into whatever it is that I'm walking into a little bit more. So, is that something that I could practically implement? Is there like a phrase that I could tell myself? Can I contemplate on this more? Journal about this more. Sometimes it's easier to look at other people from this space before I even look at myself as essentially worthy, like, and then build that muscle. So, like, for example, can I start looking at my child as essentially whole and worthy? And eat and look at that child like that, look at that student like that, extend it to others. And then maybe the more I build that muscle, I could kind of bring that to myself, redirect that energy or that practice then to myself. That might be something practical for our listeners to walk away with.
Yeah, because sometimes it
Right.
feels like too hard to see myself in that way, but I'm okay to give it to somebody else. And then, yeah, I think it's definitely something you can bring to yourself. You can bring to yourself on like, in terms of an intention of, how would I feel if I was coming from a place of essential value, to just introduce the possibility. Do we have any other uh, implementable tools?
Yeah. Something I was also thinking about was kind of doing like a body check, because I know that for sure is an indicator to me. We were talking about this earlier, but it could also just be like, am I feeling rigid right now? Am I feeling inflexible? Am I feeling stressed? Am I feeling defensive? And can I dial that back to figure out why am I feeling those things? Because if I am, it might be coming from a space of lack of essential value. And if I could kind of reset myself, then maybe I could come back to my wholeness. But sometimes even just looking at the external, everyday experience, what's coming up for me, even just like a body check, just like in your body, like in your shoulders and your stomach, is something telling, is your body telling you something?
Yeah,
Your
how
body
much
is
tension
telling
is holding.
you, yeah, that you're not standing in your essential worthiness. And that might be a way to gain more awareness around it.
Yeah, because I think what we're describing is that if we when we are, there's a certain relaxation, uh, a certain like I can breathe. Um, so how difficult does it feel to access that? Um, and I guess something that I'm thinking like as we're sort of talking about this, some principles are more like by nature they're more tangible to kind of wrap up and hold and implement, like ownership. It's a very sort of physical thing, like to take ownership of your well-being. There's very practical steps involved with that.
Hmm.
And I think essential value is a little less tangible in the sense that because it is very much about a self-perception, an identity, a belief system. um, and it's very difficult to just you know to do something. It's not, you're not going to do something and get it. It's not that kind of thing. um, so but having it in mind as something that I would like to believe more, um, and think about more, and then there's obviously Hasidus, which speaks about it a lot in terms of if you want to integrate that perspective more, um, and I think conversation around this idea with people could be helpful. But it's really like something that needs to sit in the mind, and it
Yeah.
needs the more ways that you can the more ways that you could bring it to your attention, and really just think like, yeah, it's something you have to think about. So it's a little harder to like stay like, 1, 2, 3, these are the steps.
Right. I do think that if we were to bring together, ownership and essential value, they could work in tandem where, like you were saying, essential value is almost like a contemplation. It's almost something that should be a thought, almost like a mitzvah medius, like a thought that you're constantly thinking about. It's like an awareness of God, an awareness of God in you, and how that translates into your real life. I do think also that taking ownership, especially when we're talking about taking ownership of my physical well being, emotional, spiritual well being, um, and beliefs, when I do take ownership in ways I'm translating that essential value into a physical action, into something actionable. So let's say a simple example of, going to take a walk around the block to relax my body and to just process something. So what might stand in a woman's way? I don't want to leave my children behind. I'm not a good mother if I leave them for 10 minutes. Um, you know, uh, there's no time for that, things like that. All the things that obstructs her from taking ownership. But if she were to take ownership and really take that walk, what she's doing is affirming to herself her essential wholeness, it that the world can live on without her, and it's her world, her identity is not based on her success as a mother or the 10 minutes that she would be spending with that child. It's not She's not being graded on that, and she is whole and human, and if she needs those 10 minutes, it's okay for her to go do that and come back to herself. So in ways, it's interesting how they kind of work together. It's kind of like
Yeah,
implementation of essential value. It could be.
yeah. I think putting them together is very important because it makes ownership. It makes ownership. It brings a health to the ownership that could sometimes, takes away the desperation or the selfishness or the neediness, or it's just coming from that very settled place of, and in general with accessing healing, when we want to grow as people, coming from the belief that we're whole. So it's about, it's not that the healing is somewhere outside of us and there's some, some something that we need to go and find. It's about, we have this purity. You mentioned that at the beginning, Elokai neshama, the neshama that's in me. It's tahira, it's pure. Um, so that's inside of me, and whatever's happened to me or whatever I've been through, has not affected that purity and that wholeness. So, and that'll always be mine. And the healing journey is about, me going back to that, bringing that out, as opposed to someone else has to teach me how to be a whole individual, because
Yeah, I think we can end off with that. Here's to uncovering and opening up essential value for ourselves and others to make space for God in our lives.
We would love to hear your feedback, thoughts, and questions.
Please leave a comment below or email us at yourrelationshift@gmail.com.
Looking forward to connecting with you.
See you next time.